Before we begin, I want to take a moment to say Happy New Year. As we step into 2026, I'm sending my best wishes to you and your family for an incredible year ahead. May it bring you health, happiness, and everything your heart desires. Now, let me tell you a story about courage that came from the most unexpected place. When Kendra Mitchell saw 95 black SUVs roll into her neighborhood at dawn, engines purring like caged predators, she thought her life was over. The night before, she'd done something no nurse should ever do. She'd challenged a Mafia underboss to his face. She'd touched the daughter of Matteo Romano without permission. Valentina's custom wheelchair, built by the finest specialists money could buy, was supposed to be untouchable. But Kendra had seen something they'd all missed. Something that made her gamble everything. Now, as suited mobsters surrounded her building, their faces hidden behind dark sunglasses, Matteo Romano stepping forward with an unreadable expression, Kendra realized she'd either performed a miracle or signed her own death warrant. Before we dive into what happens next, if you appreciate stories about ordinary people who risk everything to do what's right, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us bring you more incredible true stories of courage and kindness. And if this story touches your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in everyday heroes. Now, let's go back to where it all began. 48 hours earlier, Kendra Mitchell had made a decision that would change everything. But right now, standing at her apartment window at 6:47 in the morning, all she could think about was survival. The rumble started low, like distant thunder rolling across the city streets, then grew into something that shook the windows of her small apartment building. One SUV, then 5, then 20, then so many she stopped counting. 95 vehicles to be exact. 95 members of the Romano crime family, all converging on her rundown neighborhood like a funeral procession answering a call to judgment. Kendra's hands trembled as she gripped the windowsill she'd been holding since she heard the first engine. Fear coiled in her chest, tightening with each breath. She was 30 years old and she'd faced danger before, hostile hospital administrators, debt collectors, the nursing board that stripped her license. But this was different. This wasn't bureaucratic cruelty. This was a criminal organization she'd challenged. A father she'd contradicted. A disabled girl she'd touched without explicit permission. The vehicles circled her building like wolves surrounding wounded prey. Chrome glinted in the early morning sun. Tailored suits and dark sunglasses told stories of loyalty, violence, and unbreakable bonds. And leading them all was a man known throughout the city as Matteo Romano. 6 feet 2 inches of controlled power, his salt and pepper hair framing a face that revealed nothing behind dark aviator sunglasses. Kendra watched through the cracked window as Matteo dismounted from his vehicle with the deliberate movements of someone who'd made this walk before. Someone who knew exactly what he was capable of. How did I get here? The question screamed through Kendra's mind as her heart hammered against her ribs. How did a broke nurse with no license and a dying bank account end up standing between 95 mobsters and whatever judgment they'd come to deliver? The answer, she knew, lay in a single moment of truth 48 hours earlier. A moment when she'd seen something everyone else had missed. A moment when she'd chosen compassion over fear. A moment when she'd bet everything on her ability to see what others couldn't. To understand what happened, you have to understand Kendra Mitchell. And to understand Kendra, you have to understand that her nursing wasn't just a career. It was a calling, a purpose, the last thing standing between her and complete failure. Kendra's alarm hadn't woken her that Thursday morning because she'd never fallen asleep. She'd spent the night staring at her ceiling, doing the math that had become her nightly ritual. Rent was due in 6 days. $1,200. Her bank account showed $347.23. Student loan payment, $450, already 2 weeks overdue. The collection agency had stopped calling. They'd moved straight to threatening letters. Her studio apartment was the kind of place where you could touch both walls from the bed. The morning light filtered through thrift store curtains, painting everything in shades of gray and regret. The coffee maker sputtered to life, the only sound in the kind of silence that comes from living alone in a city that's forgotten you exist. She poured yesterday's coffee into a chipped mug, added water to stretch it, and microwaved it for 90 seconds. Breakfast would be the pack of ramen she'd been saving, split into 2 meals. Above her tiny desk, pinned to the wall, was a single photograph. Kendra in scrubs, arm around her grandmother, both smiling at the camera. Her grandmother had raised her, worked 3 jobs to put Kendra through nursing school, and died 6 months before Kendra graduated. She'd never seen Kendra become a pediatric ICU nurse. Never saw her granddaughter save her first life. But she'd believed in her. That belief was all Kendra had left now. Kendra had learned precision in the pediatric ICU. 8 years caring for the sickest children, the ones fighting for every breath. She'd learned to see what others missed, to trust her instincts when monitors lied and protocols failed. The other nurses used to joke that Kendra could diagnose a problem before it showed up on the charts. Could feel when something was wrong in her bones. Nurses keep children alive, her grandmother used to tell her. Every medication you double-check, every vital sign you catch, that's someone's baby coming home. Kendra had taken that seriously. Maybe too seriously. Her ex-supervisor used to say Kendra cared more about patients than protocols. Said she could spend 6 hours advocating for a child's care but couldn't spend 6 minutes following proper authorization procedures. She wasn't entirely wrong. Kendra understood sick children. They made sense. They told you where it hurt if you listened carefully enough. Bureaucracy was messy, eh? Bureaucracy had rules that put paperwork before people. Bureaucracy left children suffering while administrators covered their liability. That Thursday morning, the day before 95 mobsters would surround her apartment, Kendra was doing what she did most mornings, barely surviving. Past due notices sat on her desk, their red stamp screaming final notice. Her breakfast was reheated coffee and whatever hope she could scrape together. She'd lost her nursing license 2 years ago, and her body had learned to move differently since then. Slower, more careful, like someone who'd been broken and badly mended. She'd just finished a night shift as a home health aide for Mrs. Chen, an elderly woman recovering from a stroke. The pay was $15 an hour, half what she'd made as an RN. Mrs. Chen had tried to give her extra money for staying late, but Kendra had waved her off. What was she going to do? Take grocery money from a 78-year-old on Social Security? Her bank account disagreed with her ethics, but Kendra had learned a long time ago that you can be poor and still be decent. In fact, sometimes being poor was the only time being decent really counted. She looked at her phone. 1 new voicemail. Probably another debt collector. She almost deleted it without listening. But some instinct honed by years of nursing, made her press play. The voice was professional, clipped, efficient. This is calling regarding a private nursing position. A family in need of immediate home health care for their daughter. The pay is $500 per day. Discretion is essential. If you're interested, please call this number within the hour. Kendra played the message 3 times. $500 per day. That was more than she made in a week of home health jobs. It was enough to catch up on rent, make a loan payment, eat something other than ramen. It was also deeply suspicious. Nobody paid that kind of money for basic home health care unless they were hiding something. But Kendra had learned that when you're drowning, you don't ask questions about the life raft. She called the number. A woman answered on the first ring, her voice carrying the kind of efficiency that came from screening hundreds of calls. Miss Mitchell. Thank you for calling back so quickly. The Romano family requires a private nurse for their daughter. She's 16, wheelchair-bound due to a spinal injury. They need someone who can handle basic care, medication management, and physical therapy assistance. The position starts today if you're available. Kendra hesitated. She should ask questions. She should research this family. She should definitely mention that she'd lost her nursing license. But the woman's next words cut through her doubt. The family is aware of your licensing situation. In fact, they specifically requested someone with your level of experience who values discretion. Will you accept the position? Kendra looked around her apartment. At the past due notices. At the empty refrigerator. At the photograph of her grandmother who'd believed she could save the world. I'll take it, she said. And with those 3 words, she set everything in motion. The address led her to a part of the city she'd only seen from bus windows. Gated estates, manicured lawns, the kind of wealth that didn't need to announce itself. The Romano mansion sat behind iron gates that opened silently as she approached, like the house had been expecting her. Security cameras tracked her movement. Guards in suits watched from the gatehouse. This wasn't old money. This was something else entirely. Kendra stepped off the bus 2 blocks away, not wanting to arrive in obvious poverty. She walked the rest of the distance, her worn nursing bag slung over her shoulder, trying to look more professional than terrified. The mansion itself was beautiful in a way that felt dangerous. Old-world Italian architecture, marble columns, windows that reflected the sky like mirrors hiding secrets. A man in a dark suit met her at the entrance. No greeting, just a thorough visual assessment that made Kendra's skin crawl. He led her through hallways that smelled like old money and furniture polish, past rooms she glimpsed but didn't dare look at directly. The medical wing was at the back of the house, state-of-the-art equipment, hospital-grade monitors, everything you could possibly need. Everything except warmth. That's when she saw him. Matteo Romano appeared in the doorway like a predator materializing from shadows. He was tall, maybe 6 feet 2 inches, with salt and pepper hair that looked intentionally styled to appear casual. His suit probably cost more than Kendra's annual income. But it was his eyes that stopped her. Gray, calculating, missing absolutely nothing. This was a man who'd built an empire on reading people, on knowing their weaknesses before they knew them themselves. Miss Mitchell. His voice was smooth, controlled, the kind of voice that never needed to be raised to convey threat. You come highly recommended for your discretion. Kendra's internal alarm bells started screaming. This man is dangerous. Every instinct she'd developed navigating hospital politics and street survival told her to run. But $500 a day. Rent in 6 days. Student loans destroying her credit. She stayed. Matteo explained with clinical precision. His daughter Valentina. 16 years old. Car accident 2 years ago. Spinal injury, paralyzed from the waist down. Her mother had died in the same accident. Valentina's care required medication management, physical therapy, basic daily assistance. The previous nurse had quit. They needed someone who could start immediately. Someone who understood that what happened in this house stayed in this house. Kendra asked the question she had to ask. You know I lost my nursing license? Matteo's expression didn't change. We know everything about you, Miss Mitchell. We know you lost your license for treating an undocumented child in the ER without proper authorization. We know the hospital threw you under the bus to avoid liability. We know you spent 2 years fighting to get it back and lost everything in the process. We know you're drowning in debt and 1 month from eviction. His pause was deliberate, weighted. We also know that you're exactly the kind of nurse my daughter needs. Someone who puts patience before paperwork. The unspoken threat hung in the air like humidity before a storm. Kendra understood what he wasn't saying. I own you now. You need this job too much to ask questions. You'll do what I tell you and keep your mouth shut. And if you don't, well, I know where you live. My daughter has suffered enough, Matteo continued, his voice dropping to something that might have been grief if it came from anyone else. I trust you'll remember that. It wasn't a request. It was a command wrapped in the velvet glove of concern. Kendra nodded because what else could she do? She'd already made her choice when she walked through those gates. Matteo led her to Valentina's room, and Kendra's heart cracked at what she saw. The girl sat in a wheelchair that looked like it cost more than a car. Sleek Italian design, titanium frame, LED diagnostic panels, the kind of equipment that screamed we spared no expense. Valentina herself was beautiful in that way 16-year-olds are before life teaches them to armor themselves. Dark hair, sharp hazel eyes, defensive posture that Kendra recognized immediately. This was a sick kid who'd been failed by too many adults. "You're the 5th nurse this month," Valentina said without preamble. "How long before you quit too?" Her voice carried equal parts challenge and resignation. Kendra had heard that tone before. It was the sound of a child who'd learned that getting attached to caregivers only guaranteed heartbreak. "I'm not here to quit," Kendra said quietly. "I'm here to help." "We'll see," Valentina replied, and turned her wheelchair away. A dismissal that would have been rude from anyone else but from this girl felt like self-preservation. Over the next few hours, Kendra went through the routine. Checking medication schedules, reviewing physical therapy protocols, learning Valentina's care requirements. The girl was polite but distant, answering questions with minimal words, making it clear that Kendra was staff, not family, and definitely not a friend. But Kendra wasn't paying attention to Valentina's words. She was watching her body. And what she saw made her nursing instincts scream. Every time Valentina moved her wheelchair, she winced. Just slightly, barely noticeable, the kind of micro-expression that someone who wasn't really looking would miss entirely. But Kendra had spent 8 years in pediatric ICU learning to read children who couldn't articulate their pain. She saw the tension in Valentina's shoulders. The way her right hand gripped the joystick too hard, calluses visible on her palm. The slight grimace when the wheelchair's brakes engaged. The unnatural curve of her spine as she sat, body constantly compensating for something wrong. Kendra knelt beside the wheelchair, her trained eye cataloging details. Bruising on Valentina's lower back, barely visible beneath her shirt. Pressure marks on her shoulders. The way her knees were positioned too far forward, forcing hyperextension. The battery pack sitting in completely the wrong position for proper weight distribution. This wheelchair, this $80,000 piece of Italian engineering, was fundamentally, catastrophically wrong. "Does it hurt?" Kendra asked quietly. Valentina's defensive walls cracked, just for a second. "They said it's the best money can buy," she said, her voice smaller than before. "Milan specialists, custom engineers, the finest equipment in the world. So it's probably just me. My body adjusting." She said it like she'd repeated this explanation to herself 1,000 times. Like she'd blamed herself for 2 years because nobody else would listen. Kendra's heart broke. She'd seen this before. The 8-year-old with chronic back pain that everyone attributed to growing pains until Kendra noticed his back brace was fitted wrong. Simple fix, instant relief, and a child who'd suffered for months because doctors trusted equipment over observation. "Money doesn't always mean right," Kendra said softly. "Sometimes expensive just means expensively wrong." She spent the next hour examining the wheelchair while Valentina talked, walls slowly lowering. The girl had been a dancer before the accident. Ballet was her life, her passion, her future. The accident had taken her mother instantly and stolen Valentina's legs in the same moment. She'd spent 2 years in this chair, in constant pain, believing her body was failing to adapt because everyone told her the equipment was perfect. Kendra found Valentina's journal, left visible on the bedside table like a silent cry for help. Page after page of entries about pain. Drawings of herself dancing, beautiful sketches that showed who she'd been before. And recent entries that made Kendra's throat tight. "Someone please help. It hurts. I'm so tired. But no one listens. I can't tell Papa. He spent so much money. It would break his heart." Kendra looked at this 16-year-old girl who'd been protecting her father from knowing she was suffering. Who'd been in agony for 2 years because specialists with degrees and credentials had built something beautiful that tortured her. who'd blamed herself because the system told her the problem couldn't be the equipment. In that moment, Kendra had a choice. She could stay quiet, collect her $500 a day, follow the care plan, keep her head down and survive. It was the smart choice. The safe choice. The choice that wouldn't get her killed or worse. Or she could do what she'd lost her license for doing. She could see the patient, not the protocol. She could speak up even when it was dangerous. She could be the kind of nurse her grandmother had raised her to be. She chose the girl. That evening, Kendra requested a private meeting with Matteo Romano. The household manager looked at her like she'd asked to walk into a lion's den, but delivered the message. 10 minutes later, Kendra stood in Matteo's study, a room that smelled like expensive leather and old power. He sat behind a massive desk, every inch of the space designed to remind visitors of their place in the hierarchy. But Kendra had learned in pediatric ICU that the scariest conversations were the most necessary ones. "Mr. Romano," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I need to speak with you about Valentina's wheelchair." Matteo's head came up slowly, his gray eyes fixing on her with the focus of a predator identifying threat. "That chair was built by the finest specialists in Milan. Cost me $80,000. Multiple engineers, doctors, experts with decades of experience. What could you possibly have to say about it after 6 hours?" "It's torturing her," Kendra said. "Every single day." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Matteo stood, and Kendra understood this was a man who'd built an empire on intimidation. "You've been here 6 hours, he repeated, his voice deadly quiet. 6 hours, and you think you know better than specialists who've dedicated their lives to this work?" Kendra stood her ground. "I've been a nurse for 10 years. 8 of those in pediatric ICU with the sickest children you can imagine. I've learned to see what others miss because in my world, missing things means children die. Those specialists didn't listen to Valentina. They saw a case study, measurements, specifications. I see your daughter. And your daughter is screaming silently, and everyone's too busy being impressed by Italian engineering to hear her." She pulled out her phone, showed him photos she'd taken of Valentina's bruising. Explained in precise medical terms how the weight distribution was backward, how the alignment was off, how every specification was technically perfect and practically devastating. She didn't sugarcoat it. She didn't soften it. She gave him the truth the way she'd given truth to parents in ICU when their children were dying. Direct, compassionate, uncompromising. The most devastating part came last. "She's been in pain for 2 years, Kendra said quietly, and she thinks it's her fault. She's protecting you from knowing because she doesn't want to disappoint you. She thinks her body is failing when it's the equipment that's failed her." Matteo's rage was a physical thing, filling the room like pressure before an explosion. But Kendra realized it wasn't directed at her. It was at himself. At the specialists he'd trusted. At the system that had failed his daughter while taking his money. "If you're wrong," he said, his voice dangerous, "if you're giving my daughter false hope, there will be consequences. Do we understand each other?" "If I'm wrong," Kendra replied, meeting his eyes, "your daughter stays in pain. That's consequence enough. But I'm not wrong. Look at the bruises. Look at her calluses. Look at how she winces every time she moves. She's been screaming for 2 years and no one's been listening because they're all too certain they already know the answer." Matteo studied her for a long moment. Kendra could see him calculating, reading her for lies, for angles, for weakness. But she had nothing left to hide. She was broke, desperate, unlicensed, and standing in front of a man who could make her disappear. The only thing she had was the truth. "And you think you can fix what they couldn't," Matteo said. It wasn't quite a question. "I know I can," Kendra answered. "But I need 24 hours and access to your medical wing. Everything in that room, any equipment I need, no questions asked." The silence stretched out like wire pulled too tight. Then Matteo spoke. 24 hours. Anything you need. But understand this, Miss Mitchell. If you fail, if you give my daughter false hope and then break her heart, there will be consequences. My men, my family, they don't forget. Do we understand each other? Kendra understood perfectly. She was betting her life on her ability to rebuild a wheelchair she'd never touched before, to fix what specialists with unlimited resources had built wrong, to save a girl she'd known for 6 hours. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was exactly why she'd become a nurse. You're risking everything, Matteo said, something that might have been respect flickering in his gray eyes. So is Valentina, Kendra replied. Every single day. As she left his study, she saw Valentina watching from her doorway. The girl's eyes were wet, hopeful, terrified. Do you really think you can help me? She whispered. I know I can, sweetheart, Kendra said. I see you. And sometimes that was all it took. Someone who actually saw you. The next 24 hours blurred into a marathon of precision and desperation. Kendra worked through the night in the medical wing, Valentina watching from her bed, asking questions, slowly trusting. She completely disassembled the wheelchair, laying components out with surgical precision. Every bolt, every joint, every electronic connection. The battery pack was 47 pounds of dead weight positioned exactly where it would crush Valentina's spine. The seat cushion created pressure points that would cause sores. The footrests forced knee hyperextension. The wheel alignment was off by degrees so small most people wouldn't notice, but those degrees added up to chronic shoulder pain. Around 10 p.m., Kendra found it. The note, hidden deep in the seat cushion where no one would see it unless they completely disassembled the chair. Paper worn soft from 2 years of compression. The handwriting young, careful, desperate. Someone please help. It hurts. I'm so tired of pretending. 4 words that represented 2 years of silent suffering. Kendra showed it to Valentina. The girl broke down. I wrote that a year ago, she said through tears. I hid it so the nurses wouldn't tell Papa. I thought if I just tried harder, if I just adjusted better, if I just stopped being so weak. Her voice cracked. But it hurts so much and I'm so tired of pretending it doesn't. Kendra sat beside her bed. This isn't your fault, she said firmly. None of this is your fault. Those specialists built something that looks perfect and functions terribly. You've been suffering because they didn't listen. But I'm listening now. She shared her own story. The 8-year-old boy with asthma, undocumented, brought to the ER by terrified parents. Hospital policy said no treatment without proper authorization. Kendra treated him anyway because he was dying and paperwork could wait. The hospital threw her under the bus to avoid liability. Lost her license, her career, everything she'd worked for. But she'd do it again because some things mattered more than rules. Valentina listened, understanding dawning. You lost everything for helping someone. Yes, Kendra said. And I'd do it again. Just like I'm doing this for you. They connected then, 2 people the system had failed, finding each other in the wreckage. Midnight hit like a physical weight. Kendra sat alone, Valentina finally sleeping, surrounded by wheelchair parts and her own doubt. What if she was wrong? What if the specialists were right and she was just an unlicensed nurse with delusions of competence? What if she made it worse? Her ex-supervisor's voice echoed in her head. You always think you know better than everyone else. The doctors, the protocols, the system. One day your arrogance will cost someone everything. Kendra's phone sat within reach, Matteo's number programmed in. She could call right now, apologize, say she needed more time, that maybe they should get a second opinion. He'd be angry but she'd survive. She could live with looking like a fool. What she couldn't live with was hurting Valentina. But then she looked at the note. Someone please help. It hurts. And she looked at Valentina sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks. And she remembered why she'd become a nurse. Not to follow protocols. Not to make administrators comfortable. To help people who were suffering when everyone else looked away. She picked up her tools and got back to work. The rebuild took precision she'd only achieved a handful of times in her career. She removed 12 pounds of unnecessary titanium, replacing it with lightweight composite materials from the medical supply room. She extended the wheelbase precisely, using measurements from Valentina's actual body, not standard specifications. She adapted orthopedic gel cushioning for the wheels, creating shock absorption. She recalibrated the joystick to respond to the lightest touch. She rebuilt the seat with memory foam molded to Valentina's specific pressure points. She repositioned everything based on how Valentina actually sat, not how some engineer thought she should sit. By 5:30 a.m., it was finished. Kendra tested every system, every movement, every response. The wheelchair looked different. Sleeker, less like medical equipment and more like a precision instrument built for a specific person. She was exhausted, terrified, and absolutely certain. This would work. Matteo appeared at 6 a.m. "Time's up," he said. "It's finished," Kendra replied. He studied the wheelchair for a long moment. "Then go home, Miss Mitchell. Get some sleep. We'll contact you tomorrow." It wasn't a request. Kendra returned to her tiny apartment, collapsed into bed, and waited. She didn't know if she'd saved Valentina or signed her own death warrant. She didn't know if she'd be thanked or disappeared. She only knew she'd done the right thing. Sometimes that had to be enough. The next morning, her phone rang before dawn. Matteo's voice, unreadable. "We're coming to you. Be ready at 6:30 a.m. The line went dead before she could ask questions. Kendra looked out her window as the sun rose, wondering if she'd see another sunset. And that's when she heard them. The engines, purring like caged predators. 95 black SUVs in perfect formation, surrounding her building. Neighbors appeared in windows, watching this impossible scene. Kendra's terror was absolute. "They're here to kill me. I was wrong. I failed." She prepared to face death with whatever dignity she could muster. But as the vehicle stopped and doors opened in synchronized precision, Kendra saw something that made her freeze. The central vehicle, Matteo's car, opened on both sides. Matteo emerged in a tailored black suit. And from the other side, Valentina in the rebuilt wheelchair. Kendra walked downstairs through a corridor of suited mobsters, every face impassive, every movement controlled. She reached the street where Matteo and Valentina waited. Her neighbors watched from windows, this impossible scene unfolding in their quiet neighborhood. "My daughter wanted to test this where you live," Matteo said, respect visible in his gray eyes. "She said if you were brave enough to speak truth in my house, we could be brave enough to come to yours." Matteo turned to his men. "If Miss Mitchell has given us a miracle, you will show her the respect she deserves. If she has failed, I will handle it. Either way, what happens here stays in the family." Kendra understood. She was being honored or executed publicly. There would be no middle ground. Valentina settled into the rebuilt wheelchair. Her eyes widened immediately. "It's so light," she breathed. "I can sit up straight." "I can." She touched the joystick gently and the chair responded instantly. "I barely touched it." She looked at Kendra with something like wonder. Then Valentina began to move. She glided down the street smoothly, no compensation needed, no fighting the chair's resistance. She rolled over a crack in the pavement and the shock absorbers worked perfectly. Her face transformed. The guarded, defensive girl disappeared and underneath was pure, unbridled joy. She picked up speed, testing the chair's limits, making tight turns that were previously impossible. She stopped smoothly, no jarring, no pain. Valentina circled back to Kendra and stopped. Tears streamed down her face but she was laughing, a breathless, disbelieving sound. "I forgot," she said, her voice breaking. I forgot what it felt like to move without hurting. I forgot what freedom felt like. She reached for Kendra's hand. You listened. You actually listened. Kendra knelt beside the wheelchair. I saw you, baby girl. That's all. Matteo was watching his daughter laugh for the first time in 2 years. His jaw was clenched tight, eyes wet, fighting to maintain control. He turned away briefly to collect himself. When he approached Kendra, he extended his hand. You gave my daughter something I couldn't buy with all my power and money, he said, his voice rough with emotion. You gave her hope. They shook, and Kendra felt the shift. This wasn't employer and employee anymore. This was something else. Family, Matteo said, turning to his men. She's family now. Anyone who threatens her answers to me. 95 mobsters erupted in approval. Not applause, too emotional for that, but nods, smiles, visible respect. Kendra realized these dangerous men had just witnessed a father's prayer answered. Her neighbors watched in amazement. A little girl asked her mother, "Is that lady a superhero?" "Yes, baby," the mother replied. "I think she is." Later that day, back in Matteo's study, he made his proposition. In my world, Miss Mitchell, debts must be paid. You gave my daughter her life back. That debt is significant. I don't want your money, Kendra said quickly. I'm not offering money, Matteo replied. I'm offering purpose. He showed her files. Over 200 people in the Romano network who needed medical care. Immigrants without papers who couldn't go to hospitals. Sex workers the system judged and abandoned. Addicts seeking treatment. Children without insurance. Families the medical system had failed. We're criminals, yes, Matteo said. But we take care of our own. And our own includes everyone the system threw away. Just like they threw you away. Kendra's hands trembled as she looked through the files. Maria, 45, domestic worker, diabetes, no insurance. Carlos, 8, undocumented, asthma, afraid of deportation. Yasmin, 23, pregnant, no prenatal care. Dozens more. All suffering. All invisible to the system that should help them. This is exactly why I lost my license, Kendra said quietly. Helping people I shouldn't. But also, these are exactly the people I became a nurse to help. Matteo watched her carefully. I know your story. I know the hospital scapegoated you. I know you fought for 2 years and lost everything. That's why you're perfect for this. The offer was simple and terrifying. Underground clinic in a Romano-controlled building. Full medical supplies. Protection from legal consequences. Patients from the community. Salary that would clear her student loans in a year. But once she was in the family, she was in forever. No walking away. No escape. Purpose, yes, but purchased with her freedom. What if I want out someday? Kendra asked. No one leaves the family, Matteo said. But no one who's truly part of it wants to. What if my conscience conflicts with your business? You treat our people. We handle our business. Your conscience stays clean. Why me? Because you see people the world ignores. Because you can't look away from suffering. Because my daughter trusts you. He paused. And because I do too. Other people stepped forward then. Luca, Matteo's enforcer, scarred and dangerous, bringing his 6-year-old daughter who had cerebral palsy. Hospital said they'd help. Been on a waiting list 18 months. Can you? Sophia, the family matriarch, bringing a list of pregnant women afraid of hospitals. More people, more stories, more need. Kendra realized this wasn't captivity. This was exactly what she'd been searching for. Purpose without bureaucracy. Helping without permission. Using her skills for people who needed them most. But it meant entering a criminal world. Losing autonomy. No going back. I have conditions, she said. Name them, Matteo replied. I treat everyone who needs it, regardless of their involvement in your business. No one dies because someone couldn't pay. And I need to be able to walk away if I can't live with what I'm doing. Matteo considered. First two, yes. Third one, we'll see if it becomes necessary. Welcome to the family, Miss Mitchell. Call me Kendra, she said. Call me Matteo, he replied, offering the first real smile she'd seen. Valentina appeared in her doorway. You're staying? I'm staying, Kendra confirmed. Good, Valentina said. I need someone who tells the truth. The next 3 months transformed everything. Kendra's clinic opened in a former restaurant space, medical equipment appearing from sources she didn't question. She treated Maria's diabetes, saved Carlos during an asthma attack, provided prenatal care for Yasmin. Word spread through the community. People who'd been invisible to the system started appearing. 50 patients a week. Then 70. Then 100. Valentina volunteered as receptionist, helping other disabled patients from her wheelchair. She and Kendra's bond deepened into something like mother and daughter. Matteo visited daily, officially checking on Valentina but staying to watch Kendra work. The tension between them grew, attraction neither acknowledged, until one late night when they were alone in the clinic. They talked about why they did what they did. Both protecting people the system abandoned. A moment of connection. An almost kiss. Kendra pulled away. This is complicated enough without, she started. Life is complicated, Matteo interrupted. This is simple. Nothing about you is simple, Kendra replied. But complications didn't stop feelings. When a rival family member was brought in with a gunshot wound and Matteo's men wanted to let him die, Kendra refused. I said I treat everyone. I meant it. Matteo was furious. That man tried to kill my nephew. And I'm a nurse, not a judge, Kendra shot back. You want me to be selective about who deserves healing? Then you don't understand who I am. Matteo walked out. Returned hours later with an apology. You're right. I asked you here because you have a conscience. Can't punish you for using it. This is who I am, Kendra said. If that doesn't work for your family, it works precisely because of who you are, Matteo replied. They kissed then, slow and intense and dangerous. 3 months in, a reporter heard about the underground clinic and wanted to expose it. Kendra was terrified of legal consequences. Matteo handled it, methods unclear, and the story became community clinic helps underserved with Kendra's name kept out. Her nursing license appeal suddenly started progressing. She confronted Matteo. I didn't want this. You deserve your license back. I merely reminded them, he said. By threatening them? By making them an offer they couldn't refuse, he replied with irony. Kendra's license was reinstated with Romano influence she couldn't refuse. The clinic expanded. Valentina started using forearm crutches, walking short distances, planning to return to modified ballet. She was accepted to pre-med. I want to be a doctor who listens, she told Kendra. Like you. The system began to change, quietly. Kendra consulted for hospitals on patient care. Trained nurses on seeing patients, not cases. Her underground clinic became a model. Other communities requested similar programs. She'd found purpose, family, love, all purchased from a criminal organization. It was complicated. It was dangerous. It was the most real thing she'd ever had. One evening, Matteo took her to dinner. Their first real date, not stolen moments between patients. Private room, family restaurant. He was nervous, this dangerous man actually nervous. I know this isn't conventional, he said. You and me. My world, your ethics. But, he pulled out a velvet box. Not a ring. Her nursing license, newly reinstated, in a beautiful frame. I had it framed. To remind you, you're not defined by what they took. You're defined by what you give. Kendra cried. I can't give you normal, Matteo continued. I can't give you safe. But I can give you purpose, protection, and, he hesitated, love. If you'll have it. This is insane, Kendra said. You're a criminal. I'm a nurse. This violates every rule that never made sense anyway, Matteo finished. You're really bad at proposals, Kendra laughed through tears. First time. Also hopefully last, he replied. I don't need conventional, Kendra said. I need real. And this? Us? It's the most real thing I've ever had. They kissed, passionate and honest and complicated. Now, months later, Kendra stood in her clinic after hours with Matteo and Valentina. Valentina practiced walking with her crutches. Kendra adjusted equipment for tomorrow's patients. Matteo watched the two most important people in his world. And Kendra thought about how she'd gotten here. They'd told her she was too compassionate to be a good nurse. Too willing to break rules for people who didn't deserve help. They took her license, her career, her future. They tried to make her small and silent and invisible. But Matteo Romano saw her. Valentina saw her. And hundreds of people the system abandoned, they saw her now. She wasn't licensed by the state anymore. She was licensed by the people who needed her. She wasn't certified by a board. She was certified by the lives she'd changed. Yes, she loved a dangerous man. Yes, she worked in a criminal organization. Yes, she'd compromised every conventional rule she once believed in. But she'd never compromised the only rule that mattered. See the person. Hear the pain. Heal what you can. They couldn't take that away. No board, no system, no institution. Because she'd learned something from Matteo that no hospital ever taught her. Sometimes the most dangerous choice is the most healing one. And she'd do it all again. Thanks for sticking with me until the very end. I really appreciate you being here. Happy New Year to you, and best wishes for an absolutely amazing 2026. May this year bring you courage like Kendra's, transformation like Valentina's, and the kind of purpose that changes everything, the purpose that comes from refusing to look away when someone needs you, even when it costs you everything. If you enjoyed this story and it touched your heart, please hit that like button, subscribe for more incredible true stories of unlikely heroes rising against impossible odds, and comment below what part of this story hit you the hardest. Did it move you when Kendra spoke truth to power? When Valentina felt freedom for the first time in years? Or when this unlikely family chose each other against all odds? I read every single comment and I love hearing from you. Remember, sometimes the most dangerous families are the ones that save you. And sometimes breaking the rules is the only way to do what's right. Take care, and Happy New Year!